Welcome to Hey, Great Shot. This is the Great Shot Podcast, a Crack Rackets and Tennis Channel Podcast Network production. My name is Alex Gruskin. On today's show, we've got another edition of The Deciding Point, our weekly breakdown of everything that happens across the Division I women's college tennis world. And joining me, as he always does, to break down what was a busy week in the college tennis season. It's crazy to say this out loud, folks. We are nearer to the finish line than the starting line of this 2023 spring dual match season. Joining me to take stock of where everything stands, as he does each and every week here on Tuesday nights, is a man you know best, as of course the returning champion of returning champions, here on our Crack Racket shows, the founder of the No Ad, No Problem blog and podcast, a man recording from offsite here tonight. It's our dear friend, John J. Parsons. Jay, hey, great shot. Welcome back to the show. Still the returning champion of returning champions. I don't know what I was thinking. You could tell I knew I messed up as it was coming out of my mouth. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, I go off-site and now my title changes. I'm doing okay. Last week you threw me an audible. You switched it up. We pre-recorded. Today, Mother Nature threw me an audible. She decided to turn off my power. So I am dialing in here off-site, and I'm glad to be here. I'm glad we could still make this work.
Well, I appreciate your efforts. I appreciate the fact that you were willing to pre-record this week. Last week, we have yet to miss an episode so far this season. We're going to go for the perfect score here in 2023. But to a point I made earlier, before we get into anything, I feel like it is an appropriate time for us to take stock, right? We've now had a couple of weeks of conference play. Certainly, we're a month removed now from the National Indoor Championships. I don't know, halfway mark. Does that feel about right for this season?
I think it does. And I think any team looking at their conference schedule feels like they've probably got some conference foes out of the way and some conference foes still left to play. So I think halfway feels about right.
That was a great rhyme, first of all, from you. Maybe offsite, but it's all working for you tonight. Yeah, I just think there are no more layups is the wrong word. There's no more room for error, margin for error. There we go. In the schedule, all of these matches from here onwards have NCAA implications, and I do want to spend a little bit more time here on tonight's show looking at the week ahead, because there are a lot of matches that caught my eye. I'm sure plenty caught yours as well. But of course, before we get there, we got to break down everything that's happened over the course of the past week. We had some major news involving one of the top contenders for the 2023 NCAA tournament. So, of course, we'll start with that to lead tonight's show. As we alluded to earlier, plenty of conference play happening across the country as well. Notable results, not only just for the top teams in the country, but of course, those teams competing for a top 16 seed, those teams competing for a spot in the NCAA tournament as well. We'll get into all of the most notable results. Again, get into our rankings, take stock of where things stand from our tiers perspective, look at the week ahead, and so much more. All of that in under an hour, as that is the deal I made with John J. Parsons here. Moving forward on this show, of course, if we can't be that efficient.
And to the listeners.
Yeah, and exactly. Well, when I say to you, you cover all categories. Again, returning champion of returning champions.
The umbrella term.
Yeah, exactly. If I make a contract with you, it's a contract with the Cracked Rackets gods. So that is the agenda for tonight's show. Of course, the reason we are able we got a funny note, and he can chime in here when we do our live shows. And thank you to everyone joining us here tonight on our Cracked Rackets YouTube channel. Weststuff says, and a deal to Weststuff as well, which is the true Cracked Rackets god, as you know. So, of course, that's the agenda. The reason we're able to do it all, because all of you do tune in, week out. And I told this to Chris as well, but I'll just share the story twice because it's a decent story. I was on the grounds in Phoenix last week, obviously had a keen eye focused on all the players with college ties, the Nuno Borgeses, Alexander Kovaceviches of the world. And I was sitting next to someone who was interested in why I was watching Kova of all people and what my job was, all these different things. I was explaining, I work in tennis. I have a particular affinity for college tennis, which I cover closely. And he goes, "Oh, if you cover college tennis closely, you must know Alex Gruskin, right? He covers everything." And I was kind of like, I'm not going to repeat the joke I said in my head, but I was like, I just lifted my name tag. I was like, yeah, that's me.
That's amazing.
And so shout out to Ben. I believe he's at, I don't want to share his Twitter handle in case he doesn't want to share because I didn't ask for permission, but shout out to Ben. He's the man. And experiences like that are what make this show so special. It's why we do it week in, week out. So I felt the need to share that story with you and all the listeners. And if you see me in the wild, please do come say hello because it's one of my favorite things in the world. Of course, one of my other favorite things is being decked out in this Ellesse gear. I mean, again, it's if it makes me look good, imagine what it can do for you. A shout out to our friends at Ellesse who have supported us all year long and will continue to do so throughout the course of this 2023 college tennis season. They have an elite catalog of, again, whether it's hoodies, polos, you name it, they've got it. You can find it all by clicking on the link in the description to this podcast. A massive shout out to our dear friends at Ellesse for their continued support of this show. All right, all of that established, let's get into everything that's happened over the course of the past week. And I think the place we have to start is with the team we've had number 2 in our Cracked Racquets poll since the end of the 2023 National Indoors, a team that's worked its way up to number 2 in the actual ITA rankings as well. A team that I think many consider a prohibitive contender to capture the 2023 NCAA title, and that, of course, is the Texas A&M Aggies. Now, the Aggies have lost one match this season. It was a loss 4-2 in the National Indoor, semifinals to North Carolina, a match we both had the pleasure of attending in person. They haven't lost since. They didn't lose this past weekend. They survived 5-2 victory over Miami, a match you rightly pointed out before it began was one certainly Miami had a shot to knock off the Aggies on this day. And the reason you emphasize that fact, not just because Miami is an exceptional squad, but because, of course, this team had been without Carson Brandstein of late. And Brandstein partnered with Mary Stoyana. I believe they're number 3 in the latest ITA doubles ranking. She had won 60 to 70% of her singles matches between the 1 and 2 single spots over the past season and a half. They're going to be without Brandstein for the remainder of the year. And look, this team has depth. They have options. They have players to turn to. But let's just start right there. There is no denying when you lose a top 5 doubles player in the country and a player who's playing top 2 in your singles lineup. I mean, it's a devastating loss. Not just, obviously, you feel it for Brandstein, who hasn't gotten to play much college tennis throughout the course of her career, finally seems to have found her rhythm in College Station, and then undergoes an injury like this, which just, takes control out of your hands. You're devastated on that front. You're also devastated because, God, was this A&M team so good, and you just want to see the best teams at their best, and this team, if they were at their best, had the opportunity to finish the year as the best.
Yeah, they did. And I think as fans of college tennis, you want those teams to step up. We all know that North Carolina, undefeated right now, ranked number 1. You want to see these other teams rival North Carolina, and you felt like that match in indoors between North Carolina and Texas A&M really had that vibe and that sense. And you felt like, okay, if this Texas A&M team outdoors, they could really be competitive against North Carolina. And they've, had ups and downs since that indoors match, but certainly their best includes a Carson Brandstein, in the top 2 positions. So it's unfortunate to see. Obviously, you mentioned she's had injuries throughout her career, derailed her from playing at all at USC and UVA, finally starting to, seemingly get healthy, acclimate to college tennis, and to have this, it's a big blow. On the flip side, I think it's an okay time for this to happen for Texas A&M, certainly on the heels of that win over Miami. They had to do it without Carson Brandstein, and, now they'll need to rally. But certainly a massive blow both to Texas A&M's chances at winning the NCAA title and also just for us as fans.
With Brandstein healthy, they were unequivocal title contenders. Without her presence, it doesn't mean they're out of the fight. And I just do want to point out the options they have moving forward, because obviously, look, they're prepared to have everyone move up a spot. Stoyana's ready to play 1. And so far throughout the course of the season, Mary Stoyana 9-0 when she has lined up at the number 1 spot, 12-1 overall on the season. She'll be fine. you move up a Selma Ewing, who's 8-5 overall in the year, but obviously has been an All-American in the past. You feel fine with her at the 2 spot. You move up, hopefully a healthy Mia Kupris to the 3 spot. Well, she's 13-1 overall this year. You feel fine. JC Goldsmith, 12-2 overall this year, but she lost 2 matches total last year at the 4 spot. You feel fine there. Even I think Smetnikov moving up to the number 5, where she's 9-3 overall so far this season. Everyone feels well positioned to slide up a spot. And here's the thing. You bring in a Jeanette Morales, who overall this season, the sophomore, 7-1 when she has been in dual match action, and she has gotten to see a bunch of late. You have a Gianna Pilette, who, of course, played a ton of matches throughout the singles lineup last year. They still have choices. They still have depth. I don't know. I still think if I'm making tiers, is North Carolina now maybe on their own in Tier 1A? That might be the fair assessment, but I would still put them in that Tier 1 firmly in the national championship conversation.
Yeah, I think the distinction is, you could hold on to the argument that North Carolina and Texas A&M were both in a tier amidst themselves. I think you could make that argument. I don't think you can make that argument when they lose Carson Brandstein. I think Texas A&M, to your point, has a lot of depth, right? And even bringing, Morales up to 6, you still have Pilette on the bench, right? Who played at 6 last season. So they have a lot of depth. It's just bringing those players that you talked about, like a Ewing who has struggled at 3, right? Bringing her up to 2. Kupris, acclimating, who has looked solid. I think that's the question. You bring everyone up. That's the downside. I think it's unequivocal. UNC is in a tier by themselves, and then the second tier is where Texas A&M falls, with, I would say, a few other teams.
Yeah, and look, A&M this weekend without Brandstein, they dropped doubles, and it is going to be something to have to negotiate new pairings. Ewing and Goldsmith, who had been really good this year, they lose a tough match this week. And then at 3, it's no longer Pilette and Kupris. It's Pilette and Morales, who lose a tough set 6-4. Now Kupris and Stoyana at that 2 spot. Now doubles where they dominated UNC at the indoors. That goes from maybe one of their biggest strengths to certainly a massive question mark in the immediate future. But Stoyana, 3 sets over Noel. Kupris, straight sets over Fenning. Goldsmith, 7-5 in the third over Bach Collins. And then Smetnikov, a good freshman-on-freshman crime, 5-4 over Mia Mack. That's a good win for the freshman. Obviously, Morales got a win over Tahan as well. They still have depth. They're still very good. And we're going to get into those tier distinctions later on. But yeah, that's a really good win for Texas A&M, particularly given that match was at home, right? Like on the home soil, even a Brandstein down on home court, a tier 1 national championship contending team wins that match. And that's what they go out and do. So that was a really impressive victory. That's where I wanted to lead tonight's show. That said, a lot of other things happening. In particular, I want to turn to the SEC because it was a boisterous week of action in the SEC, and every result mattered. Every result offered just like a sliver, a little nugget of intrigue moving forward. Let's start with Georgia. Or let's just start with the Auburn weekend in general, because Auburn knocked off 5-2 by Georgia. For what it's worth, they take the doubles point in that match. Georgia, good bounce back, for them to do that match, win that match, particularly given it was at home. I don't think that was unexpected. The big one is Tennessee. They get another one. Tennessee 6-1 over this Auburn team, Jay. I'm not going to toot the horn because I've done that enough throughout the course of the season as it relates to Tennessee, but I don't know. Someone in this show was certainly a believer in these Vols entering this 2023 season, and we had this conversation. There's a lot of similarities in these Auburn and Tennessee rosters. Ultimately, Tennessee, again, dominant in singles, Jay. They win all 6 singles matches. They win them all in straight sets. Come on now. Your thoughts on these 2 results?
Well, I mean, the one silver lining for Auburn is that they did win doubles in both of those matches. But look, Tennessee, I think we've both been aware that this is a talented team. I think I made the comparison that this Tennessee team this year is the Auburn team of last year, right? Where you're not sure where they're going to win their points, but they could win at every single position. And they did that exactly against Auburn this time. It was a dominant performance. I think it probably didn't help Auburn having to go inside there at Tennessee, but Tennessee is looking every bit kind of the tier two at this point, maybe a tier one contender given the Brandstein departure in the SEC.
Can I give you a Tennessee hot take?
Sure.
What if they're the A&M of last year, where it's a really experienced team? And last year's A&M team, you had Makarova, you had Goldsmith. I'm blanking on who played six. She was injured a lot throughout the start of the season. She was in by the end, but you had a lot of experienced pieces. Brandstein, I know it was her first full year of play, but certainly had been around the college tennis block. You never knew exactly where they were going to win their points, but they could win them just about everywhere. You know, again, we didn't get to see that team really tested at the national indoors. We didn't get to see this Tennessee team at the national indoors this season, and yet both teams have thrived in conference play. That's a common thread between the two. Is that a fair comparison?
No, because the A&M team last year, you knew you could count on points. You knew Makarova and Goldsmith are going to win at doubles. They were probably going to win the doubles point. You knew Makarova was going to win at number 2. And I think that A&M team of last year had more elite end talent than this Tennessee team does, right? Don't think they really have like a top 20 player on the team, but they have like 6 25 through 25, I would say, to like 75, right? They got like 6 players in that range. And that's why I think it's much more equivalent to Auburn of last year, where, you know, there wasn't really a top 20 player on that team, but they just had a ton of depth, and all of those players were very similar level.
13-2 now overall on the season, wins over Auburn, Vanderbilt. Obviously, the 2 losses are the more significant ones. Losses at NC State, at Ohio State. Seems really good. This team has firmly ensconced itself in that top 16 discussion. And again, that's a very good win over Auburn. Tough road weekend. And I mean, no doubt about that for the Tigers. I don't know if I read too much into this on their end, right? It's just like they were on, you know, a lot of things have broken right for Auburn this weekend, this year. This weekend they didn't.
Yeah, I don't know if I expected these score lines, but I didn't expect Auburn to come away with a victory. This feels about where their level is. I think to start the season, things were breaking right. And as you said, you know, now it's tougher tests.
The question is for the freshmen, again, how do they hold up this deep into the season? And I guess the real thing for me is they lost 8 matches straight set. You know, the first 4 singles matches after winning doubles in both matches, you lose 8 of them in straight sets. Can't have that.
Yeah, it's tough. And they probably, with, you know, Ovunk out for the season, who would probably anchor this team at number 1. This is an example of these freshmen, right, who are sitting there in the middle of the lineup, all have to move up a spot, right, and playing higher than they likely would. So they're all getting battle tested, and they're, you know, losing matches that they're not used to losing, and losing more than they're used to losing. So it's good experience for these freshmen in the long term, but it's, you know, tough getting roughed up in the SEC.
Yeah, very well said. Well, speaking of which, we had a major upset in the SEC. Oh, you have something else?
Well, we did, and we can transition to that in a second. But we also had an upset in that Georgia-Auburn match. Caroline Ansari beating Dasha Vidmanova, I thought was a stunning result. So that was the one player that really turned it around from that Tennessee match to get a result that I don't think most people saw coming.
See, you're right in the sense that it was surprising. You're right in the sense of the matchup. You feel like the Vidmanova weapons she'd have time to get to them, but that's just what Ansari does. Like, she's one of those, all right, backs are against the wall. We need the set here. And don't worry, Ansari's going to force the third. You got 2 hours there. We have some time. Like, after winning
was it 3 sets?
No. She won in straights.
Yeah.
You're correct. But I'm saying just in general, like, she's not losing matches in less than 3 sets. That's just like, I don't know. It didn't shock me that much.
But she did against Tennessee.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, I mean, I just
used the magic.
I had to give credit to her. But you're right. There was a team upset that we should also talk about.
I wonder, though, was she... I'll look it up after we're talking about the team upset. Was she the last one off, though, in that Tennessee match? Because that, you know, at that point...
No, she wasn't. DJ
Oh.
Bennett and Lopata were the last one they played a 10-point tiebreak.
No. I'm saying in the Auburn Tennessee match.
Oh, in the Tennessee match.
Yeah, because if if your team's lost 5 straight set matches and you're the 6th one on, that's a schedule loss. That's just like anyways, we can move on from there. Let's talk about the upset. Kentucky, winless in SEC play last season. They've now gotten a couple wins in conference play, including an impressive 4-2 victory on the road in Gainesville. This Kentucky team takes the doubles point. They get a straight set victory at the number 6 singles position and 3 set wins at the 1 and 3 spots. You had 4 3-setters in this match, Jay. I mean, Kentucky's just scrappy. Like, I've watched this team with my eyes, and Arusha, Molina, Gonzalez, even Ellesse, who has rapidly worked her way up the lineup, they just have grinders up and down. They make you work. It's a really good win for Kentucky.
Well, it's huge for the ranking. It's huge for their placement in the SEC. But, Florida was without Dahlstrom at the number 2 position, who has been extremely solid, like coming off a win over Sarah Hamner of South Carolina. So, yeah, great win for Kentucky. But, there were circumstances at play here that helped aided that win, I would say.
Yeah, well said. And again, I wanted to focus on the glass half full because players
it's
like
still
Arusha,
full. I mean, you get the win. It's great.
No. You're right. I just meant I wanted to lead with that because I think that's something. Again, Kentucky is not going to win the NCAA championship. Kentucky can now make the NCAA tournament this year, puts themselves in a position to where, all right, things are still alive. Halfway mark of the year, we've got conference play ahead. If you weren't a win like this, on the flip side, why you're so disappointed if you're a Florida fan is they beat Vanderbilt the Friday before, and it was a pretty comprehensive 6-1 victory over Vanderbilt as well. And to follow that up with the 4-2 loss to Kentucky at home, that's the brutal one, right?
Yeah,
that's the whole point. Is it's just like in a year where the top 16 margins are so thin, you can't lose that home match.
Yeah, it's brutal, right? And on the flip side, the Kentucky side, it breathes life into them, right? Gives them confidence going into the last half of the SEC season. And for Florida, it probably takes the wind out of their sails, right? Coming off of that Vandy win, feeling like, okay, we can kind of jockey for a top position here in the SEC. And this, definitely brings them down a peg, probably both in confidence, but then also quite literally in the SEC standings.
Yeah, well said. Obviously, on the flip side, Vanderbilt, disastrous weekend for the Commodores. Not only do they drop that match to Florida 6-1, they drop one 4-1 at South Carolina as well. And I do think we should have South Carolina's pretty darn solid overall now. They've done this for a couple of weeks consecutively, started conference play strong, but I mean, you look for this Vanderbilt team again. Yes, they're on the road. Yes, Florida, South Carolina are probably both top 25 teams, but 6-1 and 4-1, like so many 3-setters just keep going against the Commodores. They're in a ton of tight matches, and sadly, they're just on the wrong end of them.
Yeah, and that South Carolina match was likely going to be 6-1 had they played it out. That was not close. I couldn't be more unimpressed with this Vanderbilt team. And I think there's a reason why these 3-set matches are going against them, right? I think that they lack a lot of the competitiveness and the ferocity that many of these teams have. It was very palpable at indoors, and it's palpable through the screen when you watch them play in the SEC. There's a reason they're losing these matches, and it's not because of the talent they have on the court.
Here's the thing. Like, again, Belmore loses 7-5 in the third to Ackley. She was in that same position against Tennessee. You had, Ellesse lost a match in straight set here, but, you had Bridget Stamma losing this one 6-2 in the third. She's on the other end of that one in Tennessee. You did have 4 3-set matches here in this South Carolina Vandy match, but it's the little things. Like, I don't know. I guess it's the idea of, it's not that I don't think they have it. It's just not the rhythm. Like, they feel a little uncomfortable doing it. It's not second nature, if that makes sense, I guess. Does it?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it is, right? But
Yeah.
like, I don't see it in person. I don't see it on the screen. Like, and the results are playing out. It's like, to your point, they left it all out there in Raleigh when they played NC State, and like, it's still on the court in Raleigh.
Yeah, it's crazy because again, this team does have talent. This team
Yeah.
does have experience. Belmore hits a massive ball. Stammel is playing lights out for a freshman. She has it. She is going to be a very good player. And, again, the Ross, Staffs, Lee, Stevens of the world, we know what they're capable of. It's just they can't get all the pieces to click on the same day. It is remarkable to watch. Because again, this Vanderbilt team is good. And like if they go to, again, just the scenario here because of geography, Ohio State again, and were to hypothetically beat them in the round of 32 and get to a round of 16, I don't know if I'd be shocked. Still, if they, again, if that match was held next weekend, I would be shocked if that happened. So a brutal weekend for Vanderbilt, a good weekend for South Carolina, though. You get the win over Vandy. You follow that up with a scrappy 4-3 win over Kentucky. I thought it was a notable week of action, certainly once again in the SEC. But we talk about this tier conversation, the halfway mark, keeping track, who's in, who's not. Top 8 is obviously the most notable thing, but top 16 matters as well, because if you are top 16, you host the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. And I want to discuss some of the results that certainly had top 16 implications over the course of the past weekend. Let's start with a couple of results in the ACC. Georgia Tech and Clemson both get 6-1 wins over Syracuse. Maybe we pulled the Syracuse trigger a hair too soon, Jay. And by I mean me. That was me. No doubt about that. I mean,
well, we
Georgia,
just said they would make the tournament.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I was ready to give them a top 16 look. I think I was starting to get intrigued. I mean, it's a good win for Georgia Tech, who's the best 9-6 team I've seen in a while. I think they're top 16 good, even if they, I guess they really have to earn a big upset here moving forward to crack into the top 16. But credit to Georgia Tech. Like that's a good win. And then again, Clemson, good win for both teams.
Yeah, Georgia Tech is always, at least in the past few years, the litmus test for top 25, right? If you can't beat them, you're probably not a top 25 team. I don't think the Syracuse is a top 25 team. There's a lot of magic that they can make happen up in Syracuse indoors. That Miami win will probably, help them for quite some time. But yeah, good win for Georgia Tech, and they're beating the teams that they need to beat, and they're losing to the ones that you would expect them to lose to.
The Georgia Tech top 3, Lee, Bilchev, Jane. So far this year, a combined 34-7 in singles matches.
Wow.
That top 3 can compete with anyone. They're exceptional.
Yeah. And that's without Ava Harstrar, right?
Yeah.
Who used to play in the top of this lineup, I believe is out for injuries. So that's another blow. And all, 2 of those players, I would say, have really stepped up.
Yeah, well said. Well, let's move on to another ACC team, Virginia. 4-3 win over Notre Dame in Charlottesville. You look for this match, comes down to Heba Sheikh, 6-4, 7-6 clinch at 4. You got to love, again, all these matches in straight sets, 4-3 result. I mean, I suppose you credit Virginia, who does drop the doubles point in this match. They get wins at the 2, 3, 4, and 6 positions. Virginia, I don't know. Is there a path to top 8 for them in your mind?
Top 8? No. I mean, it would require them, I think, to run the table in the ACC at this point. But there's a little bit of a softness, right, in terms of that like 8, 9, 10, 11 range. So if they do, right, if they beat NC State or they get another good win in the ACC tournament, there's a path there. I'm just not sure if they'll be able to execute on it.
Do we know if we're going to see Annabelle Shu again this year?
Well, Annabelle Shu is out of the shoe, from what I can tell. She was in a boot. So we'll see. I think the prognosis is positive, but that will be a huge element of whether or not they can make a top 8 seed.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is they are getting Melody Collard a bunch of repetitions. She's 6-2 so far in dual match plays. Iodato's 8-5, Shakes 11-2. They have options at the bottom of their lineup. They do have depth, and so, again, Virginia's already beaten Duke. this season.
Yeah.
They're going to have to get some big wins, no doubt about it, but don't count them out of that top 8 conversation quite yet. And certainly they are very firmly in the hunt for top 16. Let's move over to the Pac-12 because I thought it was an interesting weekend of Pac-12 results. First of all, in this top 16 discussion has to be Washington, right? Washington 12-3 overall on the year. Wins now over Baylor, USC, Arizona State, Arizona, UCLA. They're undefeated in conference play. They got the big 4-3 win over Vanderbilt at the indoors. Here's the problem. How valuable is that Vanderbilt win now moving forward? Do they have to run the table in the Pac-12 to be, how many teams are the Pac-12 going to get? Is there room for both Stanford and Washington, or is that dual match going to be a top 16 pick'em?
I think it could be a top 16 pick'em. I think there's enough meat on the bone on the Stanford schedule that they can secure themselves a top 16 seed. Now, if they lose to Washington, then Washington's probably in.
So Washington has to win that match. That's what you're telling me.
I think so. Yeah.
You look, they've already beaten, again, USC and UCLA. You look at this week's rankings, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but Washington right now currently sitting at exactly 16. I mean, they play Cal. That's not going to mean much on the rankings, but they still do have Cal on the schedule. They've got a San Diego match this weekend. That's not invaluable, but certainly not the most valuable. Yeah, at Stanford, April 14th. Circle it on your calendars. That's a must-have for Washington. Although, for what it's worth, that UCLA win, I think, is going to continue to become more valuable. And you look for UCLA 4-1 victory for them over USC. This match was on USC's campus, which is worth noting because they do play the home and home for this UCLA team. They take the doubles point. They get victories at the 1, 2, 4, and 6 spots. 1, 2, and 6 spots. These freshmen for UCLA, or I should say these underclassmen, because Kimmy Hance gets a good 2-3 win over Snow Han as well. Now, tough day, or I think I said 1, 2, and 6. That's completely incorrect. They got wins at 2. What am I missing? I see doubles. I see 2. I see 6. Yeah, and 1, which doesn't say win, but the retirement. Yeah. For Maddie Sieg, which obviously disappointing because those are 2 of the better freshmen in the country. 4-1 win, though, for the Bruins. They back up what we saw in their victory over Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, tough bounce back for USC after the loss against Pepperdine to come out and play UCLA riding that momentum from that Ohio State match. Look, I was going to make this comment about the top 16 in the Pac-12. A lot of it depends on if you have a UCLA starting to creep back up the rankings, right? That becomes more and more valuable for Washington in that case. Stanford hasn't played UCLA yet, but if they were to get that win, again, that's starting to feed into the points there. But this UCLA team is starting to look a little bit more what you would expect to see on paper, right? Getting Vagramov, who is kind of the senior leader on this team, back playing in the form that we're used to seeing her in, and starting to get more production from, Tian at number 1, who's looked extremely good, Kimmy Hance at 2. So they have a lot of pieces. And when you look on paper, there's no reason that this UCLA team isn't a top 25, competing for a top 16 seed.
Yeah, and you're right. Vagramov up a set in 4-5 on Emma Cherney, the freshman. Vanessa Ong gets a really good win over Koenig at 6. The one that, again, on the USC side of things, Cayetano at 3, she gets a good win over Catan's right. No doubt about that. They had Naomi Chung in the lineup. She was at the 5 spot. She was in a 3rd set. Again, this USC team, they're just running out of matches on their schedule. Yes, they have another one against UCLA on the road. They've got Stanford coming to town this Saturday. I don't want to say those are must-win matches to get into the NCAA tournament because this team is probably fine. Big picture, you look for USC right now, currently sitting at number 38. But, again, if they won out from here, including the Pac-12 championship, I still don't think they'd have enough to be top 16.
Top 16, they might. Just there's
It'd
so
be very
many,
close. They would have to take that Washington spot.
Yeah, I don't think the Pac-12 is getting more than 2 teams, right, in the top 16 seed. But there's enough in there. If you win out, right, and you get a win over Washington in the tournament, you get a win over ASU, right, you get a win over Stanford, another win over UCLA. There's meat on the bone.
I have a smile on my face. I have a tangent for you.
Okay.
Who would you rather not face first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament? Who would you rather not have as the floater coming to your district, your region, excuse me? I watched the Hunger Games recently on Netflix, so district was in mind. Coming to your region, USC or Vanderbilt? Who would you want less?
USC.
You'd want, wow. Why? Because they bring in the best player?
Yeah. I mean, they bring in the best player, right, in Maddie Sieg. So I don't know who my number one is in this situation, but that could be a loss. And then look, at some point, you expect Snowhan and Aaron Cayetano to start playing much better. I think Cayetano's starting to trend in that direction. If she stays at 3, that's a tough out for any 3 in the country. So I would feel I would feel more concerned if I was a team that my match calculus is much stricter. Look, I mean, South Carolina almost just swept all 6 singles from Vandy. Yeah. If I'm any top 16 seed, I think I can beat Vandy.
Emma Charney is a year away from being the new Lisa Czar. There's a hot take for you. I really like the freshman's game. I love the grind I saw from her against Tim Chiwat. I know that one went against her, but like, lose that match your freshman year. Look at what she's going to be as a junior. I'm a fan. You're right. Like, I know that's crazy to say. I think that's the right take. And that's why I wanted to ask you, because I'm always scared when we agree. But no, keep your eye on the Pac-12. Again, dangerous teams, even if they aren't all highly ranked. Let's talk about a Big Ten result. That certainly caught my eye. Ohio State 7-0 over Wisconsin. Now, it's always tough to play in the Ty Tucker Tennis Center, but you look for this Ohio State team, for them to take doubles, get straight set wins from the players that have carried them all week long. Kontos, Ratliff, Barizniak, 1, 2, 5. Of course, they also get a straight set win from Marzal. Boulay gets a big 3-set win at 3 just for her confidence. And then we see Akanksha Bond in at the number 6 spot. We have not seen much of the Columbia transfer in singles. She gets in, she gets a win. Again, Wisconsin has been frisky. That's how you say that in English. They were unable to overcome the biggest challenge. Go to Columbus, get a win.
Yeah, at this point, it's almost hard to take any stock in the wins that happened there in Columbus, because it's like, I mean, those courts are so fast. The environment is so tough. Most teams are just so unfamiliar with it. I do think Ohio State's the better team. So I think the better team won. But, we'll see if these teams face each other again in the Big Ten championship. Wisconsin feels a little bit to me like an Auburn or some of these other teams that were ranked highly when we're only counting a few ranked wins. And as we start to go deeper and deeper into their countable wins, I think we'll start to see Wisconsin fall off.
Will we see Coley Allen in singles moving forward, or do you think we might see some experimentation for Ohio State?
Well, we talked about that after their UCLA loss. They have to experiment, right? Sure. They have to move things around. Now, whether Coley Allen's out of the lineup or if she's more in that 5-6 spot, that feels probably like a better spot for her.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the experimentation again. Marzal, the good win at 4 as well. It was a good bounce back for the Buckeyes to beat them definitively at home. That's how you'd expect them to bounce back. That's how they do it. They're going to be top 16. Too many good wins. That win over Georgia alone. But again, they've racked up a bunch. They'll be fine moving forward. Texas gets a good win, 6-1 over Kansas. Probably knocks Kansas firmly out of top 16 contention. Not that they were ever in it, but, they played Iowa State a couple weeks ago. We talked about that. Now that they've lost to Texas as well, probably too tough for them. But it's a really good bounce back for this Longhorn team. And, again, slowly but surely, Rivkin gets a win at 6. Kieran continues to look really good at the number 1 spot. That's an impressive straight set victory over Ngannou. I mean, again, overall, they dropped doubles, 6 singles victories on the day, 3 of them in straight sets. It got tough. It's a good win, though, for this Texas team.
Yeah, good win. Their ranking will appreciate it. Look, this is a Texas team where, I mean, I don't know if they can be top 8. I think that's the question. I don't know if there's enough there. And I think there's probably only one spot for the Big 12 in the top 8. And it's going to be tough. We're going to have a lot of non-top 8 teams that historically would be a title contender, or even this year are title contenders. But the way that these rankings are falling are just not in that, double host spot.
They're going to play Iowa State, which is this weekend. We'll talk about that in a second. They still have at NC State on their schedule as well.
Yeah, sneaky.
You do that, You beat Oklahoma. You beat two of Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Iowa State on your way to a Big 12 title. Maybe you sneak in, but that's a lot of winning the rest of the way. And it's a narrow path.
Yeah, that gets them in. It boots Iowa State out. Yeah. Right. Like there's room for one in the Big 12 right now.
That's very, very fair. And it will be fascinating. Again, we're going to talk about that matchup in a little bit. But no, I mean, those were the big ones with top 16 implications in my mind. I do want to rapid fire through some other results before we get to our rankings, get to the week ahead. USC did get a win, 4-2 over Princeton. They needed it. And again, 38 in the rankings. They're holding firm. Any particular more USC thoughts, or can I throw another one at you?
Yeah, throw another one.
Oregon, 4-2 over Utah.
A little bit of a surprise. I mean, this Utah team coming off of that good win, well, the win over Cal, which historically program-wise is a good win. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wanted to add, by the way, another good one, Kansas 4-3 over Baylor. Baylor, though, did get a win this weekend. I believe it was the 500th for head coach for their head coach. And so again, massive credit to the Baylor Bears. That's quite the milestone. All right. Arizona 4-0 over Illinois. That one surprised me.
That one really surprised me. And dare we use that to question the strength of these Big Ten teams?
Oh, here we go. Rice 4-3 over Charlotte. Upset, certainly. Charlotte team is 30 in the country.
Yeah, and riding kind of a career best year so far in program history. So that was definitely an upset for that Rice team.
Yeah, the other one that surprised me, BC 4-1 over Clemson. That was the one. Just Clemson's not out. They're not top 25. They are NCAA tournament good. I didn't expect that loss.
I didn't expect that loss either. I thought Clemson had played a lot of the ACC schools tough. Even if they were losing matches, I thought, they were going 3 sets and they were still competitive in a lot of those matches. I was very surprised by that loss.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all of that said, those are the most notable results from the past week in the Division I women's college tennis world. With all those in mind, let's move now to our Cracked Racquets rankings. And look, not a ton of movement. I'll be honest, I didn't change a single team in my top 10 from last week to this week. I know A&M got knocked off Miami, but I still had Miami pretty firmly at that 10 spot. I'm not sure we had a ton of movement in our rankings this week overall. I think Stanford re-enters them. That's the big note here. But North Carolina 1, A&M 2, Georgia 3, Pepperdine 4, Iowa State 5, Michigan 6, NC State 7, Duke 8, Virginia 9, Stanford 10. I mean, the notable teams missing, I would say, are Tennessee, who has a claim to 10, Miami, who would have a claim to 10, and maybe Texas, who has a claim to 10. I feel pretty fine, though, with this overall. What say you?
Yeah, I think this is the right group. I think looks like we're not giving Michigan as much respect as the ITA rankings are giving them. Other than that, I think that this is right. It's interesting to see those kind of 3 ACC schools, NC State, Duke, Virginia, down there at the bottom.
Yeah, and for the record, the comparison for the ITA rankings, North Carolina at the number 1 spot there, A&M 2, Michigan 3, again, a little bit of a difference, 3 spots higher than where we have them, Georgia 4, Pepperdine 5, Iowa State 6, Ohio State 7, NC State 8, Virginia 9, Duke at the number 10 spot. Let's have the tier conversation, though, because for me, I think we now are at a point where we can reestablish who are the national championship contenders. What does the inner circle look like? Let's keep that ITA top 10 on the board because that'll be the rankings obviously ultimately used. Is North Carolina the only tier 1 national title contender, or are they tier 1A in the sense that, yeah, they're ahead of the field, but you still think they could be beaten?
Man, so much nuance in this.
Yeah.
I mean, they're tier 1. I would then put all the other schools in a tier 2. But that doesn't mean that only North Carolina can win this thing, right?
Well, tier 1 is my definition of you can win a national championship. Now, 1A versus B is fine. Sorry, carry on.
I mean, this is semantics, but okay, fine. Tier 1A is North Carolina.
Okay, I agree with you, and I do think they're on a half a tier of their own. But if they got beaten on a given day by any of these teams, I think we have seen a level capable of it. Would you still keep A&M tier 1B?
Yeah, so this is tier 1B, A&M.
Yes. Michigan?
I'm fine keeping them there. I know where my cutoff is now.
I don't know if I'm ready to say Michigan yet. Oh, I'll do it just because how could I not? Georgia?
Yep.
I agree. Pepperdine?
Yep.
I agree. Iowa State?
This is where I stop.
Even would you include NC State?
Not right now.
Would you include Virginia?
No.
Duke?
No.
Auburn?
No.
Tennessee?
No.
Miami?
No.
Texas?
Stop means stop. No.
Well, what about Stanford?
I
See,
put I
I knew
put
I'd get
Stanford
there
in this.
eventually.
Yeah, I put Stanford in that list, tier
Okay,
1B. And again, these
so
are going to be fluid, right? These are not like you can't move into tier 1B. But for a
for
team
sure.
like NC State, like they have not looked like a tier 1B contender.
Yeah, I think I'd go A&M, Michigan, Georgia, Pepperdine. I'd still have NC State there on principle. And I'd have Duke there as my Stanford of just, I know what they're going to be capable of. I've watched them get better. I think the pieces are starting to round into form. So that would be my inner circle, the 6 teams I would turn to right now. But, again, Iowa State's right there. Texas, Stanford, right there. Virginia, right there as well. Just because I don't want to get yelled at. Oklahoma right there. Just again, with depending on how they round out the season, I still think there are plenty of frisky teams. But yeah, I'd say 6 in like 6 teams in the inner circle right now. That feels about right at the halfway mark. And again, with that in mind, let's end today's show by looking at the week ahead because all of these matches now have national championship implications. All of these matches certainly worth keeping an eye on as a college tennis fan. And, again, I divided my list of matches I'm keeping an eye on into tiers this week because I am watching so many. I have 2 tier 1, drop everything that you're doing. Make sure you make time to watch these matches. And again, as the lights go out on Jay, the lights will go out on this show pretty soon as well. My tier 1 matches, Jay, Iowa State at Texas, Tennessee at Georgia. You could only pick one of those. Which one are you watching and why?
So you have Iowa State at Texas, and then the second one was
Tennessee
at Georgia.
Yeah.
Well, I think you have to go Tennessee at Georgia because we've seen Iowa State at Texas. It's going to look different, but we have seen that match.
Okay. So then make the case for Tennessee, Georgia. What are you looking forward to most?
Well, look, this is a question of if Tennessee is tier 1 in the SEC, right? And I think that given the absence of Anya Hurtle for Georgia, right, this is a Tennessee team that is certainly positioned well to take advantage of that potential lack of depth for this Georgia team, although Georgia is very deep. I think the biggest question for Tennessee will be, can they hang in those top 3 positions? Or will they need to rely on depth? So I'm very curious to see what this looks like. It's also, Georgia's biggest test since indoors, right? So I'm curious to see how they stack up against Tennessee. The Iowa State-Texas match, you could just tell me the result, and I think I could know how the match played out.
See, I'm going to go the other way. I think I know enough about these Tennessee and Georgia teams. I know the pieces. I know the characters. I know that match is going to be really good. I still don't know how good Iowa State or Texas is. And if Iowa State goes to Austin and beats this Texas team again, I mean, come on now. At that point, they are in the inner circle. At that point, you have to look at Obi and Kadlikova and all the pieces that have come together so fluidly this year and just say, yep, this team's got a recipe. They know how to put 4 points on the board. They're top 8 good. That's why that match is more intriguing to me because I think Georgia's top 8 good. I think Tennessee's right on the precipice of that conversation as well. And if they end up as a top 8 seed, 7 or 8, it's not going to shock me. I just, if Iowa State ends the year top 8, if they go to Texas and win, I mean, again, that's the one I want to watch most closely. So that is extraordinarily fascinating to me. That's the one I will have my eye on. But I got a bunch of tier 2s as well. You want me to rapid fire through them?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I'll give you the match. You give me a thought. Virginia at Miami.
The race for, number 2 in the ACC.
A&M at Auburn.
I think A&M rolls.
Well, let's see. Again, they should roll, but at Auburn, after a tough Auburn weekend, how does this team bounce back from that? If they take the doubles point, surely they're not going to lose 4 straight set singles matches again, right? That'll be fascinating. Oklahoma at Pepperdine.
Oof. This is an interesting one. It's going to be all about Oklahoma's 4 through 6, and if they can steal one of those top 3.
Yeah, if you're Oklahoma, it's got to be now in that quest, not just for top 8, but certainly top 16 as well. Michigan at Florida.
I hope Dahlstrom is back. I hope she's back and healthy, and we get Florida's best. This is a good test. I love the scheduling from Coach Bernstein on this. Huge credit to her for taking advantage of spring break, heading down to Florida, getting some outdoor play in. It's much needed before they return to frigid and indoor tennis.
Yeah, speaking of which, Wisconsin at Michigan.
Wisconsin at Michigan?
Yeah.
You got to turn back around and play Wisconsin indoors back in Michigan?
I think it's a Wednesday, Friday scenario, Wednesday, Sunday, maybe.
Oh, well, that scheduling is now a brutal. I mean, Michigan should do what Ohio State did to Wisconsin.
Yeah, okay. Stanford at USC, UCLA.
Again, if Stanford wants to be and thinks that they're a top 8 team, they need to roll through these matches.
Cal at UCLA, USC. Who knows? That's exactly the response. It's just like, who knows what we're going to see in those matches? So
no idea.
Yeah, I'm excited for this, again, Northern California, Southern California battles that we've got going on this weekend in the Pac-12. I'll have my eyes on them. The Tier 3, Washington and Oklahoma at San Diego, UCF at Georgia Tech, Wake at Notre Dame. More broadly, a lot of good college tennis across the board. Of course, we'll have college tennis broadcasts for you Friday, Sunday, ACC, SEC Network Plus, ESPN Plus as well. We'll have Big Ten coverage for you on Sunday over on our Cracked Racquets YouTube channel as well. We also, of course, do have our weekly SEC roundup from our newest writer, Archit Suresh. So be sure to check that out on our website, crackedrackets.com. Archit does a great job breaking down everything as it unfolds. Jay, before we wrap tonight's show, I know the lights are out on you, but any final thoughts?
I hope the lights come back on.
Yeah, very well said. Well, then with all of that in mind, for the fantastic John J. Parsons, for our super producer, Daniel Westoff, our friends at Ellesse, who we are immensely grateful for, and of course, for all of us here at both Cracked Racquets and the Tennis Channel Podcast Network, I'm your host, Alex Gruskin. Jay, what do we tell our listeners?
Hey, great shot.
And we will see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.